Now I would like to kindly welcome Dr. Petak from KPS Diagnostic and ask him to present his topic named Molecular Profile-Based Decision Support in Precision Oncology.
Thank you very much, dear chairs, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. This is really special for me, although I speak in English, but my name tells me that I have a Slavic origin, so maybe somewhere from here, so I feel really at home. So this is why I'm very happy to share with you my excitement, because I'm sure you agree with me that we are living in a very great time for oncology. This is a great time to be an oncologist and to be in cancer research. And this is because we are after some major landmarks in human history. The first was, I think, the sequencing the human genome in 2003. So we always think about science as an endless ongoing endeavor, but sometimes there are some milestones we have to recognize. This was something like this when we had the full human genome. And this enabled us to initiate the Cancer Genome Project. And in the last 10 years, we systematically sequenced hundreds and thousands of cancer genomes. And by now, most of the major cancer genomes have been published. And now we know that there are around 550 genes which have mutations in cancers. And this is almost the final number. And this is great to think about. This is a big number, but it's a limited number because the human genome is a closed box. We need millions of years to evolve a new gene. And there is a limited number of genes which involve in regulation of cell proliferation. So we know now. And also we can focus on 138 driver genes, which was named by Professor Fogelstein last year. So this driver gene is the new word for oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes, we all know, but these are the drivers of genes. Of course, the problem is that things get complicated if you go to the level of the mutations. We just heard in the previous presentation that it matters which kind of mutation we have, and right now we have 1.5 million mutations in the COSMIC database. But the even greater news is that we have many targeted drugs already in clinical use and much more in clinical trials. And it just illustrates that right now we have around 30, but there are 200 in clinical trials and 800 in development. And even the pessimists say that in these new targeted clinical trials, at least 25% of the drugs will pass by and get to the market. So we have to be prepared to use 50 more targeted therapies in the next 2 years. And this will make us change from the present approach where we really, when we have just few targeted therapies, we do diagnostic tests, biomarkers to decide if you can use a certain drug or not. So we ask the pathology to do an EGFR test to see if you can use an EGFR inhibitor. We ask for an ALK test to see if we can use a crizotinib. We ask for a test if we run a clinical trial. But we can change this paradigm and we can say that, okay, we are not looking anymore for patients for a drug, but now we are looking for the best targeted therapy for our patient. And maybe this is why this year the multiplex genotyping and next generation sequencing was included into the NCCN guideline. So EGFR and ALK can be tested separately or as part of a panel. And the question is, how can we incorporate this into our daily practice in clinical routine in Europe? And this is why we initiated a collaborative effort through Europe, and we are looking for partner oncology centers where the oncologists use targeted therapies or run targeted clinical trials. And we collected, they listed the compounds all in clinical use or clinical trials, And we linked these 230 compounds to 58 genes. And this is in an NGS panel, and we added the relevant fish analysis. So this was the one part of the job, and the molecular diagnostics. This can be done by ourselves or also in our partners. So any institute or oncology center who has set up its own NGS facility can do its own. So this is once we want to build a collaborative effort. And what we really try to provide is an informative tool to accelerate the interpretation of such results, because the major obstacle to use a 58 gene panel in clinical practice is that we just don't have time to interpret the results in 5 minutes, what is typically available in a busy day for a patient. So this is why we do the analysis and try to provide a report which is clinically feasible to use, which lists the compounds positively or negatively associated or compounds in clinical trials right now available for this patient. And this whole analysis starts with the analysis of the NGS data. We have to remember that now the mathematical algorithm used to analyze the NGS is part of the analytical process, and the quality of the data depends also on the way how we analyze data. We have to know the coverage, how much, the percentage of that mutation, and so on. Next, if you find out which are the mutations, we have to decide if this mutation is really a driver or just a passenger. It's just a bystander, but it happens. So does this mutation has any clinical relevance or not? Is it biologically important or not? This can be done by 2 ways. There is a statistical method. It was introduced by Fogelstein professor, when he said that if a mutation occurs in more than 20% of mutations in the gene, it shows that there is a proliferation advantage of the cell having the mutation, that therefore probably that's a driver. So we can use that kind of method. Or we can use functional data, simply reports where they use constructs of the gene constructs with this mutation, and they could turn normal cells into tumor cells, for instance, and create xenografts or so on. The next step is a pathway analysis, to really look through the pathways and look for indirect targets which are positively or negatively associated with the driver gene. And of course, we just heard that it's very important to know if that particular mutation causes resistance or sensitivity to the drug which actually acts on that target. So it's getting more complicated. And because most of the drugs or compounds are still only in clinical trials, we have to know where these clinical trials are, also in our country and maybe also in other countries in Europe. For example, maybe in Cologne there is a trial which looks for FGFR amplified tumors, but it's only a few % of the population, so it's very hard for them to recruit enough patients if they only screen their own patients. So, and also maybe there is another one in Barcelona and also another one in Prague or Pilsen, and maybe it would be nice to refer patients to each other. Although I know it's difficult in Europe, but in our experience is that in half of our patients can find an appropriate molecular matching trial in the home country, and half of them can find in another European country. So we have to, but to find really the right trial, we have to combine the clinical history and the molecular profile data together. And the most difficult one, and this will be your task, I think, in the next decades, is to really integrate this kind of approach into the daily practice and the evidence-based strategy planning of the patients. It may be that there is a clinical trial in the second line and the third line for the patient, or a targeted therapy possibility, but in order to the patient to be eligible for that trial, it needs a special kind of first line of chemotherapy. So it's And also when you have to consider how much likely that the targeted therapy will work in the presence of a certain mutation in EGFR, because maybe there is an EGFR mutation which predicts a good response, but there is another one which predicts less response, and then you have to think which approach is the best. I think it will be very exciting, and really we have to be experts in this. And this is just a figure very quickly about a simple model what kind of targets we have in NC non-small cell lung cancer. Of course, we know about EGFR, and then we have many targeted drugs for that. But now we have also drugs which are not registered, but actually listed in the NCCN guideline. For example, afatinib or trastuzumab in EGFR2 mutant or amplified lung cancers, which is interesting new thing that they include such recommendations already, or like the crizotinib, not only for ARC translocated cancers, but also for CMET amplified. What we really have to see here is the numbers, the percentages, that we have to get used to these small percentages, few percentage. If we look at this picture in a horizontal way, we can see that half of the non-small cell lung cancers have either KRAS mutation or mutation in other major oncogenes, and half of them have either EGFR mutation or EGFR amplification or neither of it. Maybe these tumors are driven by the autocrine upregulation of the antiregulin. And if you just remember the results of the BR21 trial of Tarceva, or any clinical trial, EGFR inhibitor trial in unselected non-small cell cancer. It's very interesting to remember that in those trials we found 50% disease control rate, 10%, around 10% objective response, which links to the EGFR mutation, and then you have 30–40% stable disease, and then you have 50% progressive disease. And if you look at these numbers, it's just intriguing to see that probably the patients progress have driver mutations in other genes, and the patients who are unstable have neither EGFR mutation or mutations in other driver genes. So the clinical experience teaches us about the biology. This is beautiful. And these are just our own results with the 58 genes sequenced in 83 non-small cell lung cancers. And these are the actual results, which are very similar to the figures we can show in review papers. So this is combined adenocarcinoma and squamous cell. So that's why we have lower number of EGFR mutations and amplifications. And these are the non-driver mutations. We have p53 mutation, which may not influence the sensitivity to EGFR inhibitors. So we can see that there's a 50% of the patients are targetable with EGFR inhibitors. And now we have another 33% with other targets. And how useful this information is. We can associate these results in 80% to compounds in clinical use or in trials, or in 45% in compounds in clinical use, or vice versa. We can associate these results, we can predict resistance to other half of the compounds. And just two examples how this information can use in the clinic. One is that one of our partner oncologists used crizotinib in a MET amplified squamous cell carcinoma patient who had a very great objective response. And but now, so this was the first report in squamous cell, but we all know that from clinical results that probably crizotinib will have a place in CMET amplified non-small cell lung cancer. And another one, which is close to our hearts, is a nice story about a lady who never was outside from her village, but now she was diagnosed with non-small cell lung cancer with brain metastasis 2 years ago actually, when and we found ALK translocation, and that time crizotinib was not registered in the EU yet. So, but we found a clinical trial in Malaga with that time with ceratinib. So she managed to travel there because her husband was a truck driver. So the company organized a trip to Malaga. So this was the only way to get there. So this was the first time she saw the sea.
So I hope that this is how we will enjoy oncology in the next years. And I think if we can combine genomics and informatics, that really we can enter this new age of precision medicine. Thank you very much for your attention.